to present the paper.
Thank you. This paper has the title Conceptions of the Origin of Sanskrit in the History of Indology, because it is a contested question in various ways, we will see. But before I start with this, I want to say just 2-3 sentences on what I got from these sessions so far, what I have learned for myself. And I think there is, it has become clear that the essential part of Indology is, of course, Sanskrit, but Sanskrit is not identical with Indology, and also historically, thematically, Indology has expanded. And Professor Stasek has also pointed out at the end the mutual benefit we can get as scholars of new Indo-Aryan or present-day India and South Asia, and scholars of Sanskrit and Asian India. Some of you may know that I have worked for quite a long time on very small peripheral languages, languages usually without scripts. And one can argue that this is, of course, something good in itself, because very frequently these small languages are threatened by extinction. They have very precious oral traditions, which are also threatened by extinction nowadays. But beyond that, I would also like to argue, and I hope this small paper of mine will also make this clear, that study of such small languages helps also in our understanding of Sanskrit and of Indo-Aryan and its history. To give just a small example, it was talked about the need for new Sanskrit dictionaries. Yeah? Sanskrit dictionary, it's known, they also contain many Sanskrit words known only from Sanskrit lexicographers. Yeah? And when I studied Sanskrit, my teacher told me, you have to be always very, very careful. Usually they don't exist in reality. Yeah? Ralph Turner, in his comparative dictionary of the Indo-Aryan languages, yet has quite a number of lexicographic forms. Yeah? But I think the reality is that there's such even more behind it. Yeah? In my work on various peripheral languages, I have come across dozens and dozens reflexes of such lexicographical Sanskrit forms. Yeah? So this is also just a small example. Deviating from the standard model of the origin of Sanskrit as the single Indo-Aryan branch within the Indo-European language family, there have been attempts from the 19th century onwards to show that Vedic Sanskrit had Indo-Aryan relatives. Yet it has also been known for a long time that some dialectal differences in Vedic Sanskrit must have existed from the times of the Rig Veda. For instance, Sanskrit iha here appears in Pali as idha, which is a word form more archaic than the Sanskrit word. In fact, according to Asko Parpala and others, dialect differences must have existed even in pre-Rigvedic times, when the speakers of Indo-Iranian language were in southern Russia in close contact with speakers of Finno-Ugrian. For instance, there's a Finnish language, Sami, has a number of words borrowed from Indo-Aryan and from Iranian. And one word is chwarvi, the horn, which corresponds with Sanskrit shringa, or rather with its a side form of this, namely shru, meaning horn. But this borrowing is older because it has preserved the initial affricate, which changed into the sibilant sh in Proto-Indo-Aryan. The affricate has also survived in Nuristani, tsu, also horn, but since the Nuristani word has lost the palatal character of the affricate, It is older than Sanskrit, but younger than the loanword in Sami. It is also known that Nuristani and the northwestern branch of New Indo-Aryan have preserved some Indo-European words which are not found in Sanskrit. There is, for instance, the Dardic language Kovar, which means co-language, spoken in Chitral. Or there is a Nuristani language called Vasivari, which also means the Vasi language. This word var or vari has no correspondence in Sanskrit, but for instance in Greek, vairo, to say, to speak, or in the English word, it's also connected. The examples so far presented do suggest some dialectal differences in Vedic Sanskrit, but they are not enough evidence for a claim that besides the Vedic language, there existed also other Indo-Aryan languages more or less different from Vedic. Yet this claim was made for the first time by August Friedrich Rudolf Hörnle in his publication in 1880 in Comparative Grammar of the Gordian Languages. Hörnle points out, I quote, and he gives linguistic arguments, but his conclusion is, thus it appears that at some former period of its history, North India was divided between two great forms of speech, which I call respectively the Shauraseni tongue and the Magadhi tongue. He uses rather critical these notions, but anyway, Hörnle regards Magadhi, the so-called Magadhi, as a reflex of the earlier immigration of people and as belonging to the what he calls the lower orders. This was later called the outer languages, which originally covered the whole of North India, whereas his Shauraseni was a reflex of a later immigration and was later called the inner languages, which divided the original language landscape like a wedge. George Abraham Grierson accepted Hörnle's thesis by and large and presented it in the introduction volume of the Linguistic Survey of India. The Linguistic Survey of India was a major publication, the bulk of which was published in the 1920s. At the same time, namely in 1926, another major publication on Indo-Aryan came out, The Origin and Development of the Bengali Language by Suniti Kumar Chatterjee. It's not just the history of Bengali. In fact, he describes the history of whole Indo-Aryan in this book. However, Chatterjee discarded the Hörnle-Grierson theory with arguments which I mentioned in a moment. However, these arguments were found so grave and substantial that the theory was not taken seriously for many decades until 2005, when it was revived by the American Indologist Franklin Southworth in his book Linguistic Archaeology of South Asia. Yet, again, it was discarded, this time by George Cardona in this book, The Indo-Aryan Languages. Before I turn to the main argument for this rejection, I need to say some more introductory words. So regarding the subgrouping of New Indo-Aryan, Allah, Illa, Ulla are used in the sense of the Sanskrit suffixes mat and vat, furnished with. Yeah? The oldest among the grammarians who dealt with these suffixes, quoted by Pischel, is Vararuchi, who may have lived between the 3rd and 5th century. The difference between the single L and the double L suffixes has been explained by Pischel as parallel to other Middle Indo-Aryan processes of single consonants getting doubled instead of deleted due to the following accentuated vowels. And he gives some examples for this, which I have to drop, I think. And I think I drop also Upper Bramsha. But here, Pischel has observed that besides this mat and vat functions, that he found more functions of this double L suffix. He found a preterital past participle function, a present participle function, and a function which one can describe as belonging to, and he quotes the Pali word Gamila, which means a villager, but obviously originally it means belonging to a village. Farmer, sorry, Gamila means farmer, not villager, but basic meaning belonging to a village. This double L suffixes could combine with other suffixes quite freely with regard to sequencing. This is an important point because it suggests that the double L suffixes were, in case of verbal formations, not always automatically added to the past tense of verbs as assumed by Southworth and others. Besides the few traces of past participle functions observed by Pischel, there are more such cases in Old Marathi. Thus it seems likely that the increased use of the double L suffixes in past participle constructions let them become tense and aspect markers. Discussing the possible historical origin of the suffixes, Southworth says, I quote, that Chatterjee mentions possible Old Indo-Aryan origins, but he also notes and rejects the suggestion of a link between the Indo-Aryan L pasts and the pasts in L found in Slavic and elsewhere in Indo-European. End of quote. So it seems that the question regarding the origin of the double L suffix is still not known. It cannot have derived from Vedic Sanskrit for obvious reasons. Yeah. Therefore, I suggest that the double L suffix is indeed of Proto-Indo-European origin, however, not of a Vedic Indo-Aryan ancestry. It must have originated from one or more Old Indo-Aryan dialects that were different from Vedic, and it surfaced in the perception of the Indian grammarians around the same time when many other out-of-language features, which I cannot mention here for lack of time, had begun to influence the Middle Indo-Aryan languages. What do we know about this Proto-Indo-European suffix? The L class of Indo-European adjectives was transformed into verbal forms in three language families, in Slavic, in Armenian, and in Tocharian. The suffix Proto-Indo-European suffix lo attached to stems that could be nominal, verbal, or adjectival. In some cases, the suffix had a diminutive or an expressive function. For instance, in Greek, makulos, thickish, which corresponds with Sanskrit bahula, thickish. In Slavic, L participles were combined with the finite forms of auxiliary verbs to create the periphrastic forms of the verb. The change from a perfect to a past function is quite a common grammaticalization path, namely by losing the semantic feature of current relevance of a past action. If the double L suffix surfaced between the 3rd and 5th century in the writings of the Indian grammarians with its various functions outlined before, then it took several more centuries until it developed a past function, because Southworth notes a lack of evidence for the L past before the 8th century CE at the earliest. This time frame may be comparable with the similar developments in Slavic. But now especially important for us is the fact that this Proto-Indo-European suffix lo could be extended by means of different preceding vowels, thereby yielding secondary formations. The following forms have been reconstructed for Proto-Indo-European, namely an ullo, elo, illo, alo, with a long a and a long e. So 5 lo suffixes themselves prefixed with a number of vowels. So only the ulo is found in Sanskrit bahula, but of course there are many more examples for this ending in Sanskrit. However, the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European suffixes resemble strikingly the 3 Middle Indo-Aryan Prakrit suffixes illa, alla, ulla. In Tocharian, the suffix lo produced verbal adjectives, gerundives, And in Tocharian A, the suffix was L, and in Tocharian B, it was L-I-E and double L-E. According to Don Ringer, Tocharianist, this double L-E in Tocharian developed from this Proto-Indo-European L-O plus adjective suffix yo. So instead of Pischel's suggestion that the doubling of the lateral is due to a following accent, the Middle Indo-Aryan forms rather seem to go back, like Tocharian B, to Ilya, Alya, Ulya, all extended by the Sanskrit gerund ya, which makes sense in my eyes grammatically. The fact that in case of the three Middle Indo-Aryan suffixes, the preceding vowels E and O are missing can be explained thus. So this lack of E and O, there's no Ello and no Ollo in Middle Indo-Aryan as a suffix, is an effect of a common Indo-Iranian merger of Proto-Indo-European E and O together with A. This is a well-known story. The suffix is also found with Anatolian Hittite adjectives and nouns, producing sometimes agent nouns through substantivation of adjectives with the meaning pertaining to, who deals with. Compare this with the before quoted example from Pali, Gar Miller, the farmer. In Lydian, another Anatolian language, there are infinitival as well as past tense forms in L, some of which are strikingly parallel in their formal structure to their Slavic correlates. Compare, for instance, Lydian esl, ESL, it's an auxiliary with the meaning of was, and Old Church Slavic bulla, has been, also an auxiliary, coming from different roots of the verb to be, corresponding to Sanskrit as and bhu, obviously. In fact, there is a further parallel to this Old Church Slavic bulla, has been, in the West Pahari variety Kyutali, where one finds bhula in the meaning was, also past tense. So I may close this paper with a reference to Cardona regarding the relationship of Indo-Iranian with other Indo-European languages. He writes, the most definitely established and accepted subgroup within Indo-European is Indo-Iranian, a subgroup adjacent to...
I have a short question about it. If it is attested in Tocharian and Church Slavic to certain extent, some traces of the past kind of thing, maybe you should consider this as a kind of convergence of Indo-Aryan with the Tocharian in the Asia and also in the maybe eastern side of Europe.
That's very difficult to say. I mean, in Tocharian you have, in Sanskrit you have the last adjectival suffix and you have the ya suffix. And the same suffixes are found in Tocharian. In Tocharian they merged and lia became double L. And I think this is something very similar must have happened in Indo-Aryan. But through contact or whether this was an independent development, I'm unable to say.
Since it is not found in Celtic or Greek or certain other far distant Indo-European branches, it cannot be reconstructed.
In Slavic, what you have in Slavic, that the single low suffix has developed a temporal past function. Yeah? But there you don't have this double L, the combination of two suffixes. This is known to me only from Indo-Aryan. That's my postulation, I guess, but it's known from Tocharian. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and next invitation goes to Professor, my friend, Korhan Kaya from Turkey.
Thank you. My article's name is A Deep Ocean Sanskrit Literature. When a human being falls into an ocean, he cannot decide which way to start swimming. Talking about Indian literature is something like that. In history, Indian civilization has at least 5,000-year-oldness. Like William Jones expressed, the ancient Indians who found decimal numbers, chess and fables, have a culture with their enormous literature and a serious political experience. Invades lasting 1,000-year long did not demolish this culture, yet all of strangers became pacified by being obliged to contribute and take something from this huge culture. India is the country who created Kalidasa, who is often likened to Shakespeare. Goethe admired Kalidasa. Democratic author Shudraka originated from this land. Buddha, supporting the idea that obtaining goods is meaningless, existed before Jesus Christ, or Turkish Yunus Emre, and Karl Marx, was born in this land. His ahimsa, Chatvari Arya Satyani, or Pratitya Samutpada conceptions create admiration within a preeminent humanitarian ideal. Upanishad philosophers, who the pioneers of Buddha and affected the philosophers such as Schopenhauer, with upper human dream, grew up in this land. It was Parameshtin who first claimed primeval entity is water before Thales. It was again him who first mentioned about the oppositions, Dvandva, before Anaximandros. Mahidasa lived before Aristoteles. Rationalist philosopher Uddalaka Aruni was prior to Parmenides. Raikva, the man with car, Garivan Raikva, who claimed that the air as the first cause is a kind of Diogenes. We can mention about more philosophers from Upanishads, such as Satyakama Jabala, Jayabali, Pratardana, Yajnavalkya. Before the philosophy had not started exactly in ancient Ionia, there were over 100 philosophers in India. Kapila, the founder of Samkhya philosophy, influenced not only the Upanishad thinkers, but also the thinkers after Upanishad with his terms called Purusha, Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. This influence showed up the most impressively in Bhagavad Gita. Also, we can see it in Mahabharata and Puranas. The term Nama Rupa, name and shape, was rehandled in Buddhist thought and was transformed into one ring of the dependent origination cycle, Pratitya Samutpada. Likening of rivers disemboguing into oceans is done very often, like all of the creatures reached the great structure by leaving their names and shapes. Atomistic philosopher Kanada mentioned about the atom 100 years ago. We can count so many sutras about Samkhya Karika, Nyaya Sutras, Yoga Sutras, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, Vedanta Sutras. Chanakya, the minister of Chandragupta, is a person who lived 100 years before Machiavelli. His work, Arthashastra, is an important record written about state administration. Medicine and surgery are also very old in India, and they all used Ayurvedic knowledge for years, and they are still using it. The books about this subject are Ayurveda and Sushruta Samhitas. In the field of grammar, we must exactly remember Panini and his immortal Ashtadhyayi. Greatness of the structure, when we have a look at Indian literature, astonishes and leads us to admiration. Rigveda, written in Vedic Sanskrit, were oldest inscriptions of India. Hymns written for Indra, Soma, Varuna, Surya, Vishnu, Vayu, Ashvins, Maruts, and other gods not only give information about Aryan's life and belief, but also guide the following times of India. There are some interesting hymns such as Frog, Gambler, Surya's Bridal, or Yamayami. One of the most important of them is the hymn of creation. Then was not non-existent nor existent. Na sadasin no sadasit tadanim. Pururavas and Urvashi is the first love story of Indo-European culture. This story is retold in Brahmanas, Mahabharata, and Puranas later. finally is shaped in Kalidasa's hands. The discussion of word and thought is pretty interesting in Brahmanas. Atharva Veda, mentioning magic and spell, is a significant source not only for Indologists but also for ethnologists. Philosophy takes shape and reaches at its peak point in Upanishads. Instead of Vedic period's natural phenomena, abstract God descriptions are done in these times. For instance, in Isha Upanishad, it is said that moves, that does not move, that is far off, that is very near, that is inside all this, and that is also outside all this. The good and the bad is discussed and questioned. The term compassion improves. Compassion mostly comes into the forefront in Buddhist philosophy. In the Dhammapada, never does hatred cease by hating, but hatred ceases by love. This is ancient law, is written. Ashvaghosha, the first court writer, was a Buddhist, and he tries to tell the life story of Buddha in Buddha Charita. We can regard Bhasa as one of the earliest and most celebrated playwrights. 13 plays, including his masterpiece, Swapnavasavadatta, are attributed to him. The topics, because death causes short-lived pain, while poverty is unending misery. Literature of tales is very strong in India. Actually, India is the cradle of tales. Indians are the inventor of fables. Panchatantra, Hitopadesha, Katasari Sagara, Shukasaptati, Simhasana Dvatrimshika, Dashakumara Charita are some of the most important fable and tale collections. We can come across with their traces in La Fontaine, Boccaccio, Grimm Brothers, Thomas Mann, Shakespeare, and Turkish Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi. The themes and motifs of some tales can help us to clarify and to strengthen historical perceptions in terms of their showing the interactions between areas and societies. For instance, the tales telling the love between a human and a mermaid can help us about showing the connection between Indian and European cultures. Similarity between the jokes taking place in Katasari Sagara and Nasreddin Hoca, Mulla Nasruddin, Turkish Nasreddin Hoca jokes, might be showing the common cultures of the same vast geographic area. Mysticism of Yunus Emre and Indian mysticism, especially in Bhagavad Gita, are among the subjects worth searching. We can count many more names related to Sanskrit literature. Kumaralata, Vasubandhu, Kumaradasa, Banabhatta, Harsha, Vishakadatta, Subandhu, Bhavabhuti, Bhartrihari, Jayadeva. It is impossible to limit Sanskrit literature to a few verses or a few pages. This article cannot be more than a torch wandered in the forest of wisdom. I would like to finish my speech with a quotation from a book named Hind, written in 1943 by Falih Rıfkı Atay, an early and important Turkish journalist. Atay expresses, Indians had one of the highest level of civilization long before the whites, calling them black. It is really so. Sanskrit literature studies to be done in Indology will be conducive to lighten the history of the world and to understanding the human being better. Thank you very much. Namo Nama Astu Sahasra Kritva.
Thank you very much, Professor Kaya. Now, only 4 minutes, only 3 minutes remaining. Other questions, please? No. Okay, thank you very much. Conclusion of the session, I'm telling something about my country. Professor Oscar and Professor Jaroslav and Professor Sola pay our great attention on Sanskrit grammar. In Sri Lanka, I myself from Sinhala citizens. In Sinhala language, we are using always Sanskrit words. You know, Janadipati, Agramatya, Amatya, Mantri. All these words are from Sanskrit, as you know. And Vishwavidyalaya, Adhyayanangsha, Peetha, Mahacharya, Acharya, Jyeshtacharya, Jyeshthakatikacharya are also in Sanskrit. And normal people in Sri Lanka also using always Sanskrit words with suffix, Sinhala suffix, you know, Sirsha. The stem is Sirsha. In Sinhala, Sirshaya. Yes, all Sirshaya. This is Hasta. In Sinhala, Hastaya, Padaya, Karnaya, Nasaya, Mukhaya, Dantaya. So, it means the only stem is changing in Sinhala language from Sanskrit. So, the stem is same. So, I think as Sri Lankan, Sri Lanka, Sri is also from Sanskrit. We think the Sri is a very pious and Shuddha Akshara. Always we are putting Sri on the top of the plugs. So, I think very happy to say I am a son of a Sanskrit. And India and Sri Lanka are agricultural countries, I think. Always majority of Sri Lankans worshipping Lord Buddha from India. Every village in Sri Lanka, we are worshipping a tree. In Sinhala, Vrikshaya. Vrikshaya. We call that Bodhi Vrikshaya. It's from also in India. Also from India. So, agriculture is in Sri Lanka and in India, everywhere. So we are doing agriculture. We are agricultural countries. So according to culture, we can agree. According to culture, we can agree. Okay, thank you very much. This is the end of the session. ICCR will give the next agenda. We are invited for